the Go Hunt Life Show, hosted by Todd Nevins.
This is Todd Nevins, and I interview people that had seemingly normal lives and careers going, but they pulled the ripcord to epically reinvent themselves in order to pursue a life full of purpose and passion. This episode is sponsored by PrintDirtCheap.com. Jeff Chrisman, the founder of Print Dirt Cheap, and the crew there are rock stars when it comes to delivering top-quality printing at a cheap price. If you've met me in the last 3 years and I handed you a business card, it was printed by Print Dirt Cheap. They're my online digital printing company for everything. They do banners, company letterhead, a ton of direct mail pieces, funky decals, even menus for restaurants. Over 30 categories of printing products, and yes, business cards. And they do it fast, and they do it cheap. Jeff has streamlined every little aspect of the business to provide the perfect user experience, delivering the best product in the industry. I have personally been to the offices, and I have seen it firsthand. But see for yourself. Go to PrintDirtCheap.com and use promo code GoHuntLife and get $10 off of your order. Or if you want to get a sample of their work, click on Sample Pack, and they'll mail you one out for free. Go to PrintDirtCheap.com, use promo code GoHuntLife for $10 off of your next print job. This episode is also sponsored by one of my companies, Click Placement. We are a pay-per-click marketing agency specializing in PPC badassery. We have literally helped hundreds of companies over the last decade drive engagement through paid search advertising using Google AdWords and Bing Ads, LinkedIn, and of course, Facebook. We work with startups, established businesses, and nonprofits to customize campaigns to drive sales or leads, build brand awareness, sell products, or generate mobile app downloads. Hit us up at clickplacement.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn to start a conversation. Go Hunt Life listeners, this episode is a little different. We are now at just over 50 episodes and coming up on our 1-year anniversary of the launch of the Go Hunt Life podcast. Every one of my guests has impacted my life in some way, and I will be forever grateful for that. This episode is dedicated to my guests so far that have allowed me to ask them questions about some of their most personal life decisions and then given me the privilege to share those stories. I've learned more than I ever could have imagined, and I feel like I'm in the middle of getting my PhD and really living a passionate life, and I have each and every one of my guests to thank for that. So thank you. If you would like to support the Go Hunt Life podcast and help us get to the 100 episode mark, please visit patreon.com/Go Hunt Life. So this episode, I asked my buddy Moby, who hosts the Austin Fire Show podcast, to sit down with me to recap what I've learned and discuss my personal journey of sharing stories on the Go Hunt Life podcast. Our conversation starts right now.
Hey, Todd.
Moby.
How are you?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
Good. This is a big milestone for you. Tomorrow, it's going to be 1 year from when you launched your podcast, Go Hunt Life.
Yeah, I'm looking at a year. I can't believe it, actually. It's gone super fast. I launched with 3 episodes live on July 1 will be officially 1 year.
Okay.
But I launched with 3 episodes live on like June 30th. And then I've dropped one every Tuesday morning at 5 to 6 a.m. for the last 48 weeks, 9 weeks, whatever it's been. So I just put out yesterday my 51st episode of the podcast. Random.
And it's called Go Hunt Life.
It's called Go Hunt Life.
I like that name because, for example, my show, it's the Austin Fire Show. It doesn't stand for something. Go Hunt Life is a real action, which is like, go hunt life. How'd you come up with that name?
Yeah, I go back and forth on that too. Like, it's a little bit arrogant for me to say, hey, I know what you should do.
Yeah.
You should go hunt life. Like, it's a little bit, like, I struggle with that a little bit. It's meant to be like a positive thing. Like, hey, man, let's all go hunt life together. Let's freaking go do it together. I was rolling through all of the different URLs that were available. I came up with my idea for the show and then my name, and then I started interviewing people, and I've learned that that's actually not 100% required in that order before you launch. But I was going through all these different words. Why not now? Why not yes? Why not today? all these things, and a buddy of mine, Cam at Galvanize, walked up to me, and I had 30 of these things out there, and I said, these URLs are available, these aren't. What do you think of this? And he said, what about Go Hunt Life? And some of them were a little bit close, and I freaking tore the sheet up. I'm like, done, URL available, locked in, Twitter handle, Facebook handle, Instagram handle within an hour. And
Boom.
that was on April 26th, 2016. I've got that date locked in when I reserved the URL. So,
and it's great because the 30 names you had, some of them probably sounded really, how would I say this? Really like, follow your passion, all that soft skills, which people think this guy's just a motivational speaker.
Yeah, I didn't want that. I'm not that.
Yeah.
Like I don't relate to that. I relate to drawing inspiration out of drawing the story and drawing the inspiration out of someone else. Yeah. I'm way more comfortable doing that than me standing up on a stage preaching about here's what you should do this. That's not my vibe. So I had forgotten about most of those titles, and I just owned Go Hunt Life. And then actually one of the things that has come out of it, and I can't remember how many episodes I was in when the word and the verb Ripcord came out. And it's just something that came out. It's that lightning strike moment, that Ripcord moment in your life where you are one person on like 1 second, and you pull the ripcord, and you're a totally different person on a totally different path that next second.
Can you give some examples of like that switch from what to what?
Yeah, I'll give an example of a guest first, and then I can back up. And for me personally, one of my guests, and Scott Willis, a local guy here with the Tequila 512, and I read an article on him 2 years ago, probably in the Austin Business Journal. He was on the concept of Go Hunt Life is that you're on the normal, predictable, safe path, and you're doing everything that society said you should do. You've got your house, you got your cars, you got your tools in your garage, you got all these things, and you're still not fulfilled. You're not happy. You want to either out of frustration pursue something else, or out of hope or inspiration or whatever it is, but you're hitting that moment like, there's more to this. There's more to this. And Scott shared the story of he was at the Austin airport, and he was a normal sales guy. He had a wife and kids and a house and all the stuff, and he was at the airport simultaneously for 7 years. He was building Tequila 512.
Okay, 7 years.
7 freaking years.
Whoa.
He was building a company, and he was like, if I would have known how difficult it is to start a tequila company in Texas, I would have never done it. So 7 years in, he's juggling family and job and company and plant exploding in Mexico with his first products and all those variables. Wow. And he was in the airport on the phone with his wife. His partner was on the plane. They were flying to Mexico for another business trip for his tequila business. And his wife's like, you're driving everybody crazy. You got to quit your job. Call your boss and quit. And he's like, okay, I'll talk about that when we get back. She's like, no, hang up the phone. Call your boss right now. Quit. Hangs up the phone. Calls his boss. Quits. Steps on that plane like frickin' Ripcord, steps on that plane from employee. He is now self-employed entrepreneur running a tequila company at that moment. That's with scary. That phone call. And he hasn't looked back. And he just rebranded right around when we launched the podcast episode last fall. And he is rocking and rolling all up and down the 35 corridor. And so I pursue people that have had that self-propelled Ripcord moment versus I do have a few guests where it happened to them, like a health issue or something where it happened to them and they had to recover. I pursue more of people that have had a like they've done it to themselves, for themselves, really is a better way to look at it. They've pulled the ripcord on their own when society, logic, spreadsheets, all of the normal things that are telling them, whoa, you're walking from a salary and 401k and benefits and security and safety. There's a zillion reasons why not to do it, yet I'm still going to do it. Yeah, so looking back on when I changed my life was my wife Allison and I were living in Dallas, the normal house, mortgage, house insurance,
car
2
payments,
cars,
everything, owning
payments,
a lot of stuff.
All the tools in the garage and a 4-wheeler and 2 living areas with stuff and all the things that are normal. And we reached a point of like, man, there's got to be something more. We don't have kids. So sometimes that ripcord moment is having kids for most people in their 30s. We didn't have that impact on our lives, but it wasn't like we weren't yearning for that. So we pulled out an idea of moving abroad, just moving somewhere. And Mexico was on our mind. And we're like, okay, let's look at this for a 2-year span. We're going to move to Mexico. And then something drastically changed with her job, and it came down to the moment when I came home and she was having a conversation with her boss, and I knew if that conversation went south, we were liquidating everything and going to Mexico right then.
That one conversation, that was the lever.
It was down to that. So I walk in the front door after a run, and she's having the conversation, and I can tell she's into the conversation. I don't know if it's going bad or good, but it's intense. And I take the dog, and we go for a walk for like 15 minutes. And I walk back, and I freaking vividly, I'm walking up the sidewalk, and I'm looking at the front door that I'm about ready to open. Right in the front door. And I'm like, my life can change right when I open this front door. And I opened that front door, and Allison came walking around from the kitchen towards me in tears. It was like, I've got to quit my job. And that was the lightning strike in our life. That freaking moment right there, that one phrase out of her mouth was like, that's it. And then that was the first domino. And then it started rolling, and we moved to Mexico 5 years, and then we moved here a year ago. And that was the personal inspiring situation for us. And then when we were living abroad, we met people that had many different lightning strike moments in their lives, and I always was just like freaking like, no, walk me through it step by step. I don't want the overgloss.
Yeah.
Like, give it to me. And so that drew me into digging into the podcast medium to share those stories, to learn more about those stories, to draw inspiration from them, and then certainly have the privilege to share them.
And that's how a lot of really good podcasts start, when people want to have those conversations,
Yep.
and then want to have more of them and want to have them published to other people.
Yeah.
That's how Tim Ferriss started, too.
Exactly. I don't know how many episodes he came up with, but he's like, man, I'm going to just do it for whatever it is. It was a low number. Like, I'll do it for 10. See
6.
what happens. Is it 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it for 6. See what happens. He's hundreds. He's the king. Like, he's the Oprah of podcasting. And he's awesome, and he's a good interviewer and all that. And you know what? I haven't listened to any of his... I don't know if I've listened to any of his first 10. I might want to go back and see like how he's evolved.
So on the first one, or the second, he's with Kevin Rose, one of his friends.
Yeah.
And they get super drunk.
Okay.
Because they
Takes the edge off.
They're just doing like tequila shots.
Okay.
And it sucks.
Okay.
It's so bad.
All right.
So everyone's nervous in the first
for
one,
sure.
right? So
For sure.
you mentioned the guy who 512 tequila.
Yep.
So he'd been working on this for 7 years.
Yeah.
And so a question for you, too, is when you had that ripcord moment where you said, I'm going to change my entire life, this is going somewhere else completely, how much preparation or years or even months of changing your mindset goes into that?
And I ask this a lot. Us, probably not long enough, but I hear this in the startup world here in Austin and all of the time, is if you're ready, you've waited too long. And so we waited. It was kind of ripcorded on us for a little bit. We had already put a plan in place, and we already knew what we were going to do eventually, but that eventually just freaking sped up on us. But we were already prepared. It wasn't like, oh my God, what are we going to do? That moment motivated us to do it much sooner than what we would have. And a lot of times, the people that I interview that make these drastic decisions is that what's leading up to it, you're freaking petrified. Like, you don't know what you're like. What am I doing? My family's telling me I'm nuts. Some of my buddies are saying hell yeah. Some of my other friends are saying you're freaking crazy. Like, and you're trying to deal with all these influences coming at you, and then your own mind and emotion, and God, how am I going to pay the bills? Like, I want to a lot of my conversations, or try to have all of my conversations drill into, yeah, this is all freaking great. Quit your job and move to Mexico. How are you going to put food on the table? How are you going to pay for this? And so, Scott, they had to sell a rental house to buy him 1 year of time to continue to get his tequila company up. So there are a lot of sacrifices that go in. common themes that have come out with leading up to pulling the ripcord, and then on the other side, a lot of it has to do with, I don't know if this is like the world coming at me with these stories more than others, but it's selling all of the stuff that doesn't matter. And that's a lot of the stuff. That's 90% of this stuff. So a lot of the themes that have come out of, I would say 90% of my conversations stems from like, I had all this stuff that I thought was going to make me happy, that I was told, well, I need to go load up on furniture because I got a big house. So I got to go fill it up. And man, I could really like a newer pickup truck and all those things. And then the breaking point is like, man, I just want to go travel, or I want to bootstrap a startup, or I want to open a bakery, or I want to jump on a sailboat. And most of those decisions come down to, but how am I going to afford this? Well, number one, I can live smaller. I can spend less. I don't need all this stuff. And so that's the minimalism piece of it. And the Minimalists podcast right now is freaking rocking. And the documentary is rocking because it's like people are reaching that point in their life like, what am I doing with like this 4,500 square foot home?
Mine's not that big.
No, it's not 4,300. and so, yeah, so the minimalism piece has percolated to the top in a lot of these conversations. So, yeah.
Things don't make you happy?
No.
Surprise!
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. Yeah.
Imagine that.
A bigger TV, a bigger couch, a nicer place won't make you happy.
Faster car, fancier car, image.
Maybe a faster car.
Yeah, you know. I don't know.
So,
I like fast cars, though.
Of course. Yeah. Passion.
Yeah.
People have this passion. For example, I meet a lot of people in my age group, and they want to travel. It's kind of a cliche. Oh, I want to travel the world.
Yep.
And they have passion around that. And later on, of course, people have that too. What do you think is the successful balancing of passion plus understanding this is how much money I need and I have the skills acquired over time to make that money in order to sustain my travel?
Okay, so one of the quotes I'm going to probably butcher this quote. Anthony Rigolosi, who was homeless in New York.
Yeah.
And working retail and living out of his car because of some bad decisions not bad decisions, just circumstances. Nothing drastic, but he's like, man, I don't have a house and I don't have a place to live, but I'm going to live out of my car for 4 months and save all I can, and I'm going to Thailand. And so he lived out of his car, and he moved to Thailand and traveled, but ran out of money. But he found somebody over in Thailand, Chiang Mai, he had an internship with this guy. And so he had an internship, and then he started editing podcasts. And he all came down to him as like, as long as I was following my passion, I felt like the world was conspiring to support me. And he just kept going, and he just kept following that. And that's what he's doing right now. He's got a podcast editing and production company because he kept just following his passion. I haven't interviewed a single person yet that was like, man, I was going to follow my passion and I just went all in and I kept following it. And then I hit a wall and I realized I was doing something dumb. Not found it. No way. I mean, one of the other drastic decisions was Roz Savage, who
has a great name, by the way.
Rosalind Savage, but she goes by Roz, of course, R-O-Z. She was making bank in London, mid-30s, management consultant, had a big house, and in her words, kept buying more stuff that I didn't need. She kept making more money to buy more stuff that I didn't need or didn't want. She walked out of that, traveled for a year, wrote a book on her travels in South America, and then got on a rowboat. She had rowed when she was in college, but back in her mid-30s then, she got on a rowboat and rowed across the freaking Atlantic Ocean.
Holy shit.
Rowed across the ocean, finished, rowed across the Pacific, then rowed across the Indian. First woman to solo row in a 23-foot rowboat across those three oceans. First woman world record. Now she's got 4 world records. And she's got books. She's friends with Richard Branson. Like, she's got sponsors. The world conspires to support someone with the guts and the courage to not be fearless, because she was full of fear. Like, she was scared to death, and she's almost died many times in the middle of the ocean by herself in a freaking 23-foot rowboat. And so she fights through it. She fights through it all the time. And that's what I interview. She's an athlete, of course. Interview people that have left the norm to pursue athletic pursuits like ultra-distance running marathons, rowing oceans. Interview people that pursue business and entrepreneurial aspirations, or people that just want to also just travel and try to figure that out. There are a million travel bloggers and travel vloggers and all of that. I've interviewed a number of those people, and they've figured out a way to monetize it, and they're working points to buy tickets, plane tickets, and all that kind of stuff. If you just keep going with the internet and with social media and with people loving cool stories and supporting those people, Patreon.com is a website that is on Go Hunt Life, and a lot of the people that I interview have Patreon accounts where their supporters can donate $2 for every YouTube video that they publish, or $2 for every podcast that's published, or whatever. So there are ways to make money. And then what they found is that it's not as expensive it is to live in Austin, Texas, as it is on the road. If you're house sitting, as an example, a couple of my guests are house sitting internationally, so they're living in someone else's home, watching their house while that person's on vacation. Typically, it revolves around watching pets. 80% of the time, it's you come in, we're out of town for 2 months. You come in, you live in our house, you watch our dogs, you take them out, you feed them. This house is yours for 2 months. They don't pay a dime. The homeowners don't pay them a dime. And these people can be working on any sort of, online businesses, or writing books, writing blogs, whatever they may be. They can work out of that person's home living for free, other than obviously food and clothing and stuff like that. But other than that, these people's biggest expenses on an annual basis are the plane tickets to get from one stint in Mexico to the next one in Bangkok to the next one in London.
That's it.
Those are the biggest expenses for those people throughout the year, are just simply plane tickets, which is just freaking outstanding.
But a big variable of being successful at doing something like that for 5 years is your ability to monetize. And so the people that you've seen who have followed their passion, they've acquired real skills that they can help other people with, right?
Yeah, and a lot of it, like me as well, like I was able to continue to make money online. I do digital marketing, and so I can do that from anywhere. And so us pulling the ripcord and going, like, we had an idea as to how we were going to pay the bills. You don't just like, okay, I quit my job. Todd said quit, so I quit. Now I'm hunting life, but shit, the cell phone bill's due in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
There is some planning that goes into it, whether it's working off of savings. That's a lot of the time is like, man, I could live for a year and then figure it out. I could just, I had some time to figure it out. I had saved for a year. I moved away from a more expensive area, so that was going to save me money, which bought me time to figure things out. And so some people have utilized their existing skills, whether it be graphic design or whatever it may be, to do it online. They've utilized their existing skills to then turn that, whether it's content writing. A couple of different people write content for blogs, or for companies to write for their company blogs. So they've turned their skills, or maybe they weren't using them in their real job. They're like, man, I loved writing in college, and I haven't written for 10 years, but I really like doing that, and I can turn that into a monetizable position if I just quit this insurance job and did what I really wanted to do, and companies will pay for that. Definitely.
And what was your thing when you quit?
When I quit, I was doing AdWords marketing. I had AdWords marketing, and I was a partner in an online job board, and so I had those two things to go down to Mexico with, that both separately gave us enough income to comfortably live in a much cheaper environment there, with cheaper healthcare, cheaper rent, cheaper everything. And we had some savings. So our Ripcord, from a financial perspective, we didn't have 6 months, or we had to really, really figure it out in 6 months, or we were going to be in trouble. We had a little bit of a cushion, money in the bank, money coming in.
Because you sold your stuff.
We sold all of our stuff, and we had saved money over the years, and so we had some money in the bank to just like give us a cushion, and then I was still making more money than we were spending there, so that enabled us to like, okay, we can breathe, we can go. That's what I've learned from like the guests. A lot of the stories from the people that I've interviewed. Our friend from Merida, Neil and Sarah, I mean, they moved to Merida from Toronto, and they had textbook Toronto jobs, sold everything, and moved to Merida to open a hotel. They plunked a bunch of cash in this hotel, and they had a run rate of 12 months. They had to figure out a new business in a new country with a new currency, with a new language, with new everything, a boutique hotel in Merida. They had to get that baby up and running in 12 months or things were going to get really freaking stressful. And so I'm like, dude, you're freaking kidding me. I know this guy personally, and I didn't know that until I was interviewing him, and I'm like, whoa. So the stories that I've been able to uncover, inspiration abounds. And somebody gave me a quote early on, and Tom Singer, actually, local podcaster here, is like, if you want to be inspired, interview 50 inspirational people. And if you want to inspire others, share those stories. That, along the way, it's one of the things that has stuck with me more and more, and now I'm 51 in.
Now you're done. Now what?
Now I'm like, well, dude, Tom, I'm inspired, man. Now what? Now I'm just going to keep going.
Okay.
I'm just going to keep going. So
I really enjoy the tactical stuff. I really enjoy when people say, okay, here's what I did, right? But 6 months before, I sold my house. I sold this. This is how much money I had saved in the bank.
Yeah.
And then I had sort of a plan, because you can't have a perfect plan.
No, definitely not.
Were you ever surprised that everyone was afraid of pulling that ripcord?
No, I was too. I mean, it is scary. There's something to be said for a comfort zone. And we were in our comfort bubble. And almost all of the people that I've interviewed, certainly all the people that I've interviewed, at one point in their life, they were in a comfort bubble. They were going, like us. They went to the same grocery store, and they knew where to get their car repaired and where to go to get their dry cleaning done and where to, all of those things. And then their friends are around them and their support system. And if they need a ride to work because their car's in the shop, like all of those things are comfortable. And when you implode that and you do it, there's fear. Like, am I screwing up my life? Like, I've worked X number of years to get to this point. I thought you're supposed to get to the point of comfort and, celebration and all of that stuff. But us and the people that we talk to, like, it's not that it's not enough. It's just like, yeah, I know where to get my car repaired. Like, that's kind of cool. But what if I didn't have a car? Then I wouldn't care about where to get my car repaired because I wouldn't have a freaking car. And so those things start rolling. And one of my most recent guests, who actually is from Dallas, and he's a big startup guy in the community, Michael Sidorzeski, brought up to us by a mutual friend of ours, Paul O'Brien. He went 1.5 years living in Dallas, Texas, without a car.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, dude, I've lived in Dallas, Texas for 18 years. How do you do that? And they sold their big house in one of the northern suburbs, and they moved downtown, and he had a bike, and he rode the bus. I'm like, how do you get up to McKinney? Like in Austin terms, it's like, how do you get to Round Rock? He's like, well, why would I want to go to McKinney? My life was downtown Dallas, and I would Uber it, and I would take the bus, and I would ride my bike. And he went 1.5 years living in Dallas, Texas with no car. And that one little thing in his life, that was one domino. And then it's just like, well, then do we really need cable TV in the house? Why don't we just stream it? And then do we really need more clothes? And do we need a house that's 3,500 square feet? No, they went down to 1,600 square feet. 2 weeks ago, they went down to 350 square feet. 2 parents, 1 daughter, 2 dogs, 350 square feet in an RV, and they rolled out of Dallas in an RV, and he's going to run he's got a startup, and he's running it and building it from his RV. And right now I think they're in Wisconsin from Dallas.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And
fascinating.
so he built, I asked a lot of the things, it's not so much like, there's also another piece of this. And so one of my guests brought up the identity, like you're losing your identity.
I'm going to pause you right there and ask you a question that builds onto that.
Okay.
Identity question.
Okay.
So I can walk out of this apartment, hit up 20 of my friends and say, hey, do you want to have lunch? Do you want to have dinner?
Okay.
And I can go to the places that I love, that I post about on my Instagram, on my Facebook,
okay,
that I know people at. That's me. If I rip the cord and 2 months later, I'm in a place, it's 4 p.m., I don't know anyone, I'm done with my job. Who am I in that city? That's a... okay, so you're assuming you're single, which you are. You're in a new city. You don't know anybody. What that
about...
identity question, yeah.
The identity question. Luckily now, you pull up a meetup group, and in an hour, there's something. There's a marketing meetup. There's a new to XYZ city meetup. There are all kinds of meetup groups every single night. Unless you're in a really small town, then maybe just go to the convenience store and hang out for a couple of hours. But if you're in a town with 50,000 people or more, there are meetup groups multiple times throughout the week. And when we moved to Merida, there was a meetup group, and then my wife actually created a Facebook group around just the local expat community in Merida. So between Facebook groups and meetup groups, there's no reason for you to have dinner by yourself for 2 weeks. There's no way. There's too many things. And coffee shops galore. Go to coffee shops and just start talking. That's assuming that there are a couple of assumptions in there. Where are you? What are you going to do? Why are you there? Like, you've got a plan, but you could plunk yourself down in Bangkok.
Yeah.
Where you don't know the language, you don't know anybody. You look different than everyone else. Everyone there has a reason to be there. You know what? Like, you're there. Like, we moved to a city where we mentally had to fight through, like, there's no reason for us to be here. Like, there's really no reason. You have to want to be there. And that's a whole different thing. When we move around the United States, most people move around the United States, it's typically job related, typically. Like, so that's the reason. So you don't ever have that thought of like, wait, why am I here? Well, I'm here because, EDS moved me. But this is, and certainly this was rolling into more of the self-employed people like us, is that you can want, and you can want to be somewhere just because you want to check it out. What's the worst case scenario is that you just simply don't like it. It doesn't click. You don't sync up. Whatever it is, you go in lean. And then you just, when we moved out of the country, a person told me, you figure out 60%.
That's
the
it.
Other 40% you're going to figure out along the way, because if you're back in Chicago, Dallas, Denver, and you're trying to figure out 61% to 100%, you're never going to pull the ripcord, because there's no way. There's way more reasons not to pull it. Stay in the house. Stay in your life. Stay in the job.
Stay in your life.
Like there are way more reasons to do that. Honestly, like when you're looking at it from a logical perspective, there really is. But if you just like, no, I know there's more. I don't care. I've always dreamt of opening a bakery, or I've always dreamt of us selling everything and getting on a sailboat and sailing out into the sea and down into the islands, and we're gonna do a YouTube channel, and we're gonna blog, and we're gonna do things online, and we're just gonna figure it out. We've got 60% of it figured out, and then let's just go with the other 40% along the way. And that is a real example of a guest. They had $100,000 saved. They were a young couple. They were around 30. They had worked their asses off, and they had lived frugally, and they had $100,000 in the bank. They bought a sailboat, and they sailed out on Lake Michigan, down through the Great Lakes, out into the ocean, and they've been out for 4 years.
4 years, wow.
4 years. And they got a YouTube channel and Patreon page, and sponsors here and there, and they are part of their story. The people support them because they are their story, and it works. They're making it work.
So you said 60% preparation, right? That's enough. Otherwise, you're never going to pull the ripcord. When do you? I know you never know how ready you are, and there's always going to be that fear. But if I want to do that, if I want to say I want to move to Mexico in a year, and when do I know that I'm ready enough? I accept the fact that I'm always going to be terrified. I'll kind of want to just stay in my apartment, this apartment, and not leave. How do I know I'm like 60% in?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. It's a gut feeling, personal question where, okay, am I going to be safe? And am I going to have money to eat, to live on for something that makes me comfortable? That could be 3 months or it could be 2 years. It depends on that person. And then once they get where they're going, what are they going to be doing? Where are they going to be living? Are they going to be safe? And then after that, you figure it out along the way. And our mentality and the mentality of the people that have left their comfort zone and actually moved, we can always move back or we can move somewhere else.
True.
Those are always on the table. We can always move back and we can always move somewhere else. But to even add multiple layers to that, add in the kid factor. Many of my guests have kids. Not many of them. I would say a third of them have kids. Whole nother ball game. Screwing my own life up is one thing. If I'm screwing up a person or people that I've brought into this world, that's a whole nother thing.
That's pressure.
And the parents that have been on the show that go through that, here's the kicker though on that. See, I'm looking at that decision like a non-parent, right? I'm thinking, man, I don't want to screw up my kids. Are you sure this is right? Are you sure this is right? Self-doubt, self-doubt, self-doubt. What I learned from interviewing guests that did this is that the decision was based on them. They're like, no, I want to show you a better life. This suburb in Houston, Texas is not what it's all cracked up to be, and I don't want you growing up thinking that it is.
Wow.
Michael with Priority Bicycles in New York, he had a young son, and he was a CEO of a software company, making bank, New York City, wife, young kid, the whole thing, and he left all of that to build bicycles. To build freaking bicycles, because he worked at a bicycle company when he was 20, and he's a cyclist. And he's like, all my buddies, when they were getting ready to buy a bike, they'd come to me like, dude, what should I buy? What should I buy? What are you gonna do? You gonna commute on it? You gonna do triathlons? Whatever. He's like, man, I kept coming home thinking, how can my son live an inspired life when he sees me coming home uninspired? So his decision was for his kids and his child. And so for the other people that have gone even more drastic, another couple out of Philadelphia got on a sailboat with 2 kids. Another couple out of Houston moved to Costa Rica with their 3 kids. It was because of the kids. I looked at it like, whoa, I'd be screwing up my kid if I left like safe public schools in Texas and took them where they don't know the language and all that. No, it's totally flipped. They did it for them. Like, no, we're going out. We're showing them. We're going to get them a different way of life. They're going to learn Spanish. They're going to learn culture. They're going to go see the world versus their world right now are the suburbs of XYZ U.S. city. And so they did it for them. Wow. Huge. Like, it took me like two guests for that to hit me like, whoa, I'm just a non-parent interviewing parents looking at this totally wrong. It's totally flipped. That's the reason they're making the decision.
That's fascinating.
Which is awesome.
I never thought that would be the case.
Yep.
I actually have this couple friend who moved to Turkey, and they have a daughter, they have a son, and it's really cool to see that they're from Texas, I think.
Okay.
Their kids are growing up in Turkey, and they're learning Turkish, and like they know these 2 different worlds completely. Yeah. What a difference that must make on a mind.
And for their entire lives has just been blown open. And so those kids, I mean, be curious to talk to them when they're 30, what would their definition be of their comfort bubble?
True, because you're always traveling. And it's very 2 different cultures.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
The question is, what are they afraid of?
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah.
I know, man. It's one What are they afraid of? I mean, the fear factor has been there the whole time, just about every conversation that I've had. And one of my guests, her and two kids, husband, wife, two kids, got on bikes from upper U.S. Actually, they started in Alaska on 4 bicycles and rode bikes all the way down to the tip of South America.
That's a lot.
3 years.
Wow.
3 years on bikes. And she has a TED Talk, and it is called What If You Were Not Afraid? Like, what if you weren't afraid is her whole premise. And when they were starting in Alaska, they were afraid. And there were multiple times throughout that journey that they were afraid. They were through the mountains. They were in ice and snow and middle of nowhere and flat tires and all of the things that you can imagine over the 3-year period of time with a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old that grew up 3 years on the road. And her thing is like, what if you were not afraid? The theme is you're always going to be afraid. I mean, there's always fear there, but fight through it. And then realize on the other side of it, like, okay, that was actually easier than I thought it was going to be, is always like the thought of what could happen. Absolutely always easier. Even the family out of Philly on the sailboat, that was the whole thing. And she was a nurse and he had a motorcycle repair business and they had 2 kids and they had a nanny and they had all the stuff. They're like, forget this. We're getting on a sailboat. And then looking back 6 months, like, we just like one right decision, just make the next right decision and then the next and the next. And when you're 10 down the road, you can look back and be like, all right, I'm better off than I was at decision number 1. Let me just make 1 more and then 10 more. And then he said it. He's like, it's easier than we thought. It's easier than we thought. And so that's comforting. I mean, that's comforting to our next big random crazy decision and anyone obviously listening that's
or watching. And one of my guests was living my life in Dallas, Texas, commuting. Him and his wife and child sold everything, packed up what they had left, and moved to the mountains of Colorado. Like, there's a lot of people that are like, man, I want to go live in the mountains. I'm here in Austin or Dallas or Chicago or whatever. God, wouldn't it be cool to live in the Rockies? They actually did it. and they sold everything except they kept 1 car, I believe, and packed up a moving van and went into the Rockies. And they did it also because of their child. They're like, man, the Dallas-Fort Worth traffic metroplex is not what it's all cracked up to be. Let's go raise our family in the mountains of Colorado and live differently and have to chop wood in the summer to get through the winter and all of those things. And one of the like defining questions was at the very end of that conversation. I'm like, okay, there's somebody right now driving on Interstate 30 in Arlington, Dallas-Fort Worth area in an F-150 pickup truck in traffic. It's 100 degrees right now in Dallas, and he's commuting home, and he's miserable. What advice, if you could sit in his passenger seat for 1 minute and talk to him, what advice would you give him? And my guest like dries like that was me. Yeah,
like that was me. And you just got to do it. You just do it. And him, there were his father passed away within weeks of them moving up to Colorado. There were an unbelievable amount of variables that were telling him, dude, universe, like, come on, man, universe is sending you some signs. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? And he kept going through it. And they've been up there now for 3 years.
Wow.
And so they're always going to be people giving you advice and signs saying, are you sure? Check your gut. Check your gut. It just, if you're sure and if you figured out 60% and you're pursuing a passion like they were, they're like, no, we're gonna see this through. We're gonna go to Colorado. And you know what? Dallas-Fort Worth is always going to be there. If we get up there and we live there for 6 months or a year, we can always come back because Dallas-Fort Worth is not going to go away.
True.
And so there's always that safety net of, we're we're in America, there's always a safety net to come back home, really. And so what's stopping you? And not all of my guests are from the U.S. There's plenty of people from London and from Canada and Australia. But, that there's always, quote unquote home to come back to if you want to. If you get out there and you're like, oh man, I don't know, I made a mistake. But I don't know. I haven't talked to those people yet. I don't know. I haven't found them, which is pretty cool. I keep finding I went through this, and I was in a hospital in Costa Rica because of a bicycle accident, and I was in there for 2 months and cracked my ribs and all that. But I was just like, well, I got out of the hospital, and then I just kept going, and then I kept going, and then I kept going. And yeah.
You got to keep going.
Yes.
Forcing mechanisms. So we've talked about this idea that passion and keep going and being 60% ready. Mm-hmm. Right? In my life, and these are much smaller things, but I've noticed a theme that when I want to do something, it's better to have kind of a mechanism that I say, even if I'm afraid, I'm going to do this. If I want to do a speech, schedule it. When I launched this podcast, I booked a booth at an expo 7 months in advance.
Okay.
I had no idea I would do a podcast. No idea. I went through 2 ideas.
You booked it first before you had it.
Yes. I was like, I'm going to have something. I don't care. I want to have something in my life, which is more than me just going out and eating and kicking with my friends. So have you noticed that is a thing? Or would you recommend that people do that? Hey, buy a ticket 6 months down.
Yes.
100%.
That's it. 100%. You booked something that you couldn't get out of. And so then you tipped one of the end dominoes first. Yeah. And so then you had to tip the first one to catch up, which is another way to do it for sure. Definitely buying the plane ticket. A friend of mine here in 2 days is moving to Bali. No, he's a traveler. He's actually a new friend, and he's a traveler anyway, but he was deciding on what country to move to. He's got an online business as well, and this was back at the end of April, and he said, I bought a plane ticket on June 2nd. So now between now and June 2nd, I got to freaking figure it out. And so he, line in the sand, I'm getting on the plane. I need to figure out what I need to do to get ready to get on the plane. And so then at that point you work, I don't know whether you call it like you're working backwards or what, but you're making all the moves because you already know the end game, stepping on the plane. Take care of do you need to open another bank account, or do you need to move money into one bank account, consolidate? If you've got, now you've got, one of the logical basic things is what about your mail? Your mailing address, where's your stuff go? Mm-hmm. Where's your stuff go? Where's your cell phone bill get delivered to? Where's your health insurance get delivered to? Open up a UPS store. If you have a business an LLC in Texas, you can't have an LLC headquartered at UPS store. Can't do it. You got to have a physical location. Well, there are companies out there that act as physical locations for LLCs for people that don't have a permanent home. So there are other options that you can go through to change where your mail, get all obviously online stuff, and clean out all of the logical clutter. Healthcare, another situation. Big variable for United States citizens is if you are in the United States for, I believe it's 35 days or less annually, the first $95,000 of your income is tax-free. So if you live 11 months out of the year outside the United States, and that can get broken up, 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, whatever. If you live outside of the United States, 11 months out of the year, you do not pay income tax on your first $95,000 in income. That's a big pay raise when you think of it that way. So there are a lot of factors and reasons that are helping you do it. It's just figuring out what's the solution on that next domino, getting the LLC headquartered somewhere, getting all of those variables in place. But booking the ticket, booking the booth, hell yeah, that is the way to do it. One of the ways to do it. is that. I mean, it was a little bit more sudden than what we had expected, and that was just.
But it worked out.
It worked out. Yeah, it was just the way it. It's not always planned, and it just worked out. So,
it worked out.
Yeah, and. Like we are sitting here talking, and then we're going to publish this, and we're like, does anybody really care? Like, is anybody listening? Like, is this like, hello? Like,
we've got viewers, yeah.
Yeah, is somebody listening to this? Does somebody care about this story that I'm sharing? A couple of like reminders along the way is that I have a friend of mine, Janelle, and she and I grew up together, went to high school together, and hadn't seen each other since high school graduation. So 20 years go by, hadn't seen her, and I start the podcast, and I'm about 10 episodes in, and we're connected on Facebook, and she sent me a private Facebook message and said, "Man, I've been listening, and if you're interested, I've got a story in my life too, if you'd like to know more." And she gave me a little bit about it, and it was an unbelievably powerful story about her young 13-year-old daughter was getting stalked on Instagram, and it motivated her to quit her safe, comfortable sales job and start a company, an app, a group messaging app for teenagers, for a safe environment for them to communicate with one another, share videos, share photos, all that stuff in a safe, parent-controlled environment. It motivated her to do that. Number one, incredibly powerful Ripcord situation, and the fact that it reconnected us after 20 years. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm only 10 episodes in. And she didn't see it on Facebook. She said she saw it on an article on Medium that I put up. Wasn't even Facebook related. Like, number one, incredible that somebody is listening. Number two, like something that I publish up every week. I'm like, I don't know who's reading, but I'm going to do it. And bam. And then another example of that was actually Cam, the guy that came up with the name. I was maybe 20 or 25 in, and he walked by me at Galvanize one day. He's like, "Man, that episode about, where's my office now? The young couple that sold everything and they've been in a Volkswagen van for a year, actually 3 or 4 years." And he's like, "I thought about that episode for 3 days." And I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me, dude. 3 days?" He's like, "Yeah, I listened to the first 20 minutes of it on the way home, and I thought about it that night, and I listened to the rest of it on the way back to work the next day, and I thought about it for 3 days." And he's like, "It was interesting, like the emotions that I went through first were like, whoa, that's awesome, inspiring, cool." And he's like, "Then I kind of felt myself being a little bit jealous and looking at it, trying to poke holes in it. Like, oh, they could do that, but I can't. They could do that. They don't have kids. I have kids. So there's my, excuse, I guess." And I'm like, you thought about that's like a conversation that I loved and published and thought, whoa, these people are awesome. Impacted somebody for 3 days. Like, whoa, that is just keep going. That just told me just keep going. Keep going. Just
and
keep
you're
going.
at 50 now.
50 now. Yeah, 50. Yeah, it's still like I always come back to the humbleness of these people. Now that I'm at 50, when I'm reaching out to new guests, certainly credibility, as you know, like the more episodes you have out there, okay, this guy's, he's in it, And so as far as like percentage of guests that are like, yes, I come on your show is getting, it's very high. But the fact that they take 30 to 45 minutes out of their day to let someone that's just emailed them a couple of times, stranger, most of the time I've never talked to them, stranger across the world, across the country, whatever, to allow me to have 45 minutes of their time asking them about incredibly personal, life-changing, life-altering why. Like, why? Like, what about the money? What about the safety? What about healthcare? What about your daughter? Like, what about your wife or husband? Like, all of those personal, real, tangible things for them to share that information with me and then allow me to then share it with dignity and is just incredibly awe-inspiring that I've got the privilege. It is truly a privilege to be able to share that with whomever is wanting to listen.
I have got to finish the rest of your episodes now. I'm really curious. Now I want to know every single detail about how they did it. Because we've been taught, going back to something you mentioned 5 minutes in, that this is how life is supposed to be. Once you have a kid, or once you do this, once you're married, once you have a job, you're supposed to live within these lines, and you can't get out. But that's not true. And that's what I love about sharing content and sharing stories of other people, is how someone who's watching this live on Facebook right now, or listening to this, can say, wow, I never knew that. Maybe I'll just go back and look at content from Todd. Maybe I'll read the book 4 Hour Work Week.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I'll go read the book Vagabonding. And just go through and find out, how can I live the life I actually want? How can I hunt the life I actually want? Sorry.
So the book that is brought up more recently than any other book is 4 Hour Work Week.
Yeah.
No doubt. There are two things that I think have impacted most of the people that I've interviewed. Number one is reading that book, and sometimes that book in a combination of the 2008-2009 economic downturn in the United States. And it's interesting, and that 09 downturn impacted our decision, and it's really interesting to see how frequently that comes up as what am I doing? I've worked all this time. Now my 401k just cratered. My E-Trade account just cratered, and I've gotten, now I'm worried about my job, and now the value of my home that we just bought 2 years ago is upside down. Like, all of those variables that hit all at once, the mortgage crisis and the Bernie Madoff hit, all of those things just triggered right there in 08, 09. And it's interesting how many people, how many decisions were made because of that forced people into, man, you're really not as comfortable as you think you are.
You're not as safe.
You're not as safe
as you think you are.
And
that's scary. That's very scary.
Yeah.
Anything around you can be taken away, not based on your actions,
right,
but just on circumstances.
On circumstances that you do not control. The cards that you are dealt at a particular time, whether it's financial or, as I said earlier, I try to stay a little bit away from health, although I've got some decisions that were made based on pretty drastic health-related things that happen to people. But, we're not as safe as we think. And, that's reinvention, man. It's reinvention time. And it doesn't matter how old you are. My oldest guest is in his early 60s, and he was 54. He was working all the time. In his words, he was way overweight. He had worked himself into having arthritis. He was 54 years old, and he started crying at his desk, wept, like, what have I done to myself? I have nobody else to blame but myself. What have I done to myself? Now what am I going to do? And within 2 years after that, he was an ultra-distance runner. When I interviewed him, he had ran across the Spanish Pyrenees, written books. He's an ultra-distance running badass all over the world. And he's turned his passion for health and saving his own life into living. Monetizing is what I almost said, but the monetization piece is that's fourth in line. Like, I'm alive. That's his argument first. I'm alive. I'm not dead from working myself into a grave. So, yeah.
That's cool. This has been one of my favorite conversations. Because, the feeling that I get from this is I can do this too. It's possible.
For sure.
Yeah. I can go hunt life. Todd, congratulations on 50 episodes. Thank you for sitting down with me. And I'll hear this when this comes on the podcast.
Moby, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't forget to hit up the rock stars at printdirtcheap.com. Use promo code GoHuntLife for $10 off of your next print job. For fast, cheap, and high-quality online printing, it's printdirtcheap.com. Hey, Life Hunters! Thank you for listening to this episode of Go Hunt Life. If you like the show and would like to support it, go to iTunes and do this. Subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and review it. It helps, and thank you. If you or someone that you know has quit their normal life to follow their dreams, I would love an introduction and maybe interview them on the show. You can find me at gohuntlife.com and also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest at Go Hunt Life. Until next time, stay weird, dare greatly, and Ripcord out.